Think about the most powerful person you have ever been in a room with. Not the loudest, not the most confident, not the one who commanded the most attention, the most powerful. I want to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Were they talking a lot, or were they barely saying anything at all? Orthodoxy. If you think back, honestly, the answer is almost always the same. The most powerful person in the room was probably the quietest one in it. And that is not a coincidence. For decades, neuroscientists, psychologists, and behavioral researchers have been quietly studying why silence, real, deliberate, strategic silence, creates more authority than almost any amount of words ever could. What they found changes how you understand every conversation you have ever been in. We live in a world that has been engineered to reward noise. Post more, say more, share more, explain yourself, defend yourself, announce your achievements, fill the silence before someone else does. And somewhere in all of that, we absorbed a belief that most of us have never consciously examined. The belief that the more you speak, the more seriously you will be taken. That visibility equals value. That articulation equals intelligence. That filling silence equals confidence. But the research says something entirely different. A series of studies across Harvard, Stanford, and Columbia found that in social and professional settings, people who spoke less were consistently rated as more competent, more trustworthy, and more influential than those who spoke more, not slightly more, significantly more. And the reason why goes all the way down to the architecture of your brain. When someone speaks, your brain processes their words, their tone, their intent. You categorize them, you form an opinion, you assign them a mental weight. But when someone goes silent, something different happens. Psychologists call it the tension vacuum. Your brain does not tolerate unanswered questions. It does not like open loops. Silence, in a social context, creates an open loop that the brain immediately feels compelled to close. So it fills the gap. It searches for meaning. It assigns importance. Boy kiwi. And in that moment, the person who is silent holds something the person who is talking does not. They hold your attention completely without saying a single word. Now, here is where it gets deeper. Your brain is wired with mirror neurons, neural circuits that fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing it. These neurons are the biological basis of empathy, of reading a room, of sensing someone's state without them telling you what it is. Arstotwag. Research by social neuroscientist Sukhvinder Obhi found that when we observe someone in a state of calm stillness, our mirror neurons begin to synchronize with that state. Their calm becomes contagious. Their stillness becomes magnetic. You begin to feel on a neurological level that this person is operating from a place of security, of depth, of things unsaid, and your brain interprets that as one thing above all others: power. There is a third mechanism, and this one is perhaps the most remarkable. Neuroscientist Dr. Jyotsian at the Medical College of Georgia discovered something that reframes how we think about silence entirely. His research found that silence is not the absence of mental activity. It is when the brain performs its deepest, most complex processing. The brain uses quiet not to rest, but to consolidate, to connect, to encrypt experience into meaning. Silence is not emptiness. It is the brain operating at full depth. And when you are silent in a conversation, while others sense the tension vacuum and feel compelled to fill it, you are doing something they are not. You are thinking, fully, without performance. History does not lie about this pattern. Abraham Lincoln was famous for sitting in silence during his cabinet meetings, letting every advisor speak until they exhausted themselves, and then delivering his position in 3 or 4 deliberate sentences. His cabinet, who initially dismissed him as an uneducated frontier lawyer, came to fear and respect the weight of those sentences more than anything else in the room. Henry Kissinger, one of the most effective negotiators of the 20th century, used silence as his primary tactical weapon. He would speak in a flat, measured tone, then go completely silent after stating a position. His counterparts, unable to tolerate the open loop, would begin negotiating against themselves. He never needed to push. The silence pushed for him. You do not need to be a president or a diplomat to recognize this pattern. Think about a job interview where the interviewer asked you a question and then went completely silent after your answer. Just looking at you. Ugh, what did you do? You kept talking. You filled the silence. You gave them more than they asked for. I, that was not an accident. Experienced interviewers, negotiators, and interrogators know that silence extracts information more effectively than any question ever could. Because your brain cannot stand the open loop, and the person who controls the silence controls the conversation. Here is something worth sitting with. Most of us were taught directly or indirectly that silence is dangerous, that it means disapproval, rejection, that if someone goes quiet, something is wrong. So we learn to fill it instantly, reflexively. We over-explain our decisions. We justify our boundaries before anyone questions them. We speak before we have finished thinking because the silence feels like a verdict. But here is what the neuroscience is actually telling you. The discomfort you feel in silence is not a signal that something is wrong. It is a signal that your nervous system was trained to fear something that the most powerful people on earth deliberately choose. Silence is not absence. It is not weakness. It is not awkwardness. It is a space where your brain does its best work, where others project their assumptions onto you and almost always assume competence and depth. The person who can sit in silence without flinching has learned something most people spend a lifetime avoiding, that they do not need to perform to exist. There is a line from the ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. But what neuroscience has now shown us is that the power of silence goes beyond listening. Silence is a signal. It is a neurological weapon. It is the creation of space that the human brain cannot ignore. And in a world where everyone is shouting, the person who learns to be still will always be the one that everyone else leans toward. So, the next time you feel the urge to fill the silence, don't. See what the silence builds for you instead. If this changed how you think about power, share it with someone who talks too much and subscribe to Neural Fire.